All right, everybody. Today we are going to be learning the three lasso tools in Adobe Photoshop. In this lesson, we are going to learn what each one of the tools does exactly. They all do a very unique set of actions. And we're going to also learn and begin to find out when it is appropriate to use each of these lasso tools. To get started, I want you guys to go into Teams and I want you to go to our newest assignment. You can go find that assignment in the Assignments tab at the very top of our Teams channel. You're going to click on it and then you're going to go to the assignment that is L3.4, the Lasso Tools. And you're going to download all of the JPEG files that are attached to this assignment. As you can see, we have 4 JPEGs here. They're all labeled with the tool that we will be using when we are working with these images in Photoshop. So we have lasso tool.jpg, we have the magnetic lasso tool 1 and 2 JPEGs, and we have the polygonal lasso tool. So again, to get started, I want you guys to download all of these images. You're just going to click the 3 dots next to the name of the image over here. Just go click the little 3 dots on the right hand side to download your image. Now, I've already done all of this and I've brought my images from my downloads folder onto my desktop. I do this just so that I see all the files that I'm working with and they're all out and visible to me. And so you can go ahead and download them. If you would like to drag them to your desktop, you can go ahead and do that. If not, we are just going to download them all. We're going to minimize Teams and we are going to open Adobe Photoshop. And now you can open Adobe Photoshop just by going ahead and opening it and then opening each one of the images. If you would prefer, you could also drag and drop any of these images into Adobe Photoshop to open them as well. I'm just going to do it the old school way. I'm going to open Adobe Photoshop and then I'm going to navigate to File up at the top and Open. You could have also clicked this Open button right here, but I'm just going to go the way that I always go, which is File, Open. I'm going to find my downloads folder or your desktop, wherever you've downloaded these images to. And I'm going to start by opening the first image, the polygonal lasso tool.jpg. So we're going to select it from our list. You should see an image with a little table and a blank canvas on a wall. I'm going to click open to go ahead and open this image. And there you have it. You should have this image open with a marble looking industrial background, a tablescape, and a blank canvas. In my workspace, I'm going to go ahead and show my layers palette. If you don't already have it visible to you, your layers palette is this this looks like 2 little sheets of paper stacked on top of each other. So I'm going to make sure that that is visible to me. And I am also going to make sure that I have all of the set tools that I want visible. You can change the way some of your tools are displayed in Photoshop. But for today, the default way that you see your workspace should be fine. As long as you see something like this, you should be good to go. All right, so I have my layers open here, and I'm going to go ahead to the left-hand side to my tools bar, and I'm going to select the lasso tool that is visible. Now, the lasso tools are always in a menu together, and they're right underneath the marquee selection tool, which is like this gridded box right here. So if you click and hold on whatever lasso tool is visible to you, most of you guys will see the standard lasso tool. Looks just like a little rope lasso. Um, so I'm going to click and hold on this tool to reveal the other menu items available to me. And I'm going to pick on the polygonal lasso tool. It's the one that looks like it's got little cat ears with a lasso around it. All right, so now you should see your polygonal lasso tool highlighted in the tools bar. And what we know about this tool from our review is that we know that this tool makes selections based on straight lines. So I could start by clicking anywhere within this canvas and I can move to the right or the left, and all I'm going to ever get is a straight line that follows me because this tool make selections based off of straight lines. It doesn't do any curves, it doesn't do anything fancy and select anything for us. These lasso tools are all based on what we do as the designer. So if we don't select it, it doesn't make the selection for us. All right, so to get started, I'm going to click anywhere on this canvas area to start my point, and I'm going to go off to the right hand side and make a line. So basically my goal for this exercise is I'm going to show you guys how to use the polygonal lasso tool to make simple selections, and then we're going to fill them with a color to make a complete shape. So I've already just made one straight line, and I'm just going to click anywhere to keep going. I think I'm going to make shape here. You can do whatever shape you like, but I'm just going to pick a lightning bolt just because I like the shape. And then once I close the selection, you should see the marching ants border around whatever shape you've drawn. So let me go back here really quick and show you guys again, just for anybody who might have missed it. So to start your selection, we're going to click anywhere to begin. So I'm just going to click right here on the canvas somewhere. I'm going to go off to the right side, and I'm going to click again to make my first line. I can maybe go down here instead. Maybe we'll just make a triangle shape. And to close off any selection, I'm going to go to where I started at my starting point. And you should see a circle appear next to your tool icon or cursor. And it's a complete little circle. And so that means, hey, you are about to close off this shape, and you're going to click it to close. And there you have it. We should have a circle, I'm sorry, excuse me, a straight polygonal type shape. And you can keep going until you've got whatever shape you want. Again, I think I'm going to go ahead and do a lightning bolt shape. So let me draw this again really quick. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just learning the tools here and what they do. All right, so I have my selection of my lightning bolt. Now, everyone, whatever selection you've made, whatever shape you've drawn with this polygonal lasso tool, you should see the marching ants border around it, which means we have made our complete selection. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my layers palette on the right hand side of my workspace, and I am going to create a new layer. So you can create a new layer by clicking on the icon right down here at the bottom of your layers palette. Some of you in the version of Photoshop you're working in, you're going to see what looks like a little piece of paper with the corner turned up. I have this box with a plus sign, so I'm going to click that, and you should make a new layer. Now, the reason I'm making a new layer is because I'm about to fill this with a color, and I don't want to make the selection and the color fill on this layer of the image. I always want to be working in a way that makes it as easy as possible to go back to my original image. So if I'm adding an element to a page, it's always best to create a new layer, work on that layer only, and then if you want to make a permanent change, you can merge your layers together. So for this, I'm going to make a new layer. So that way I'm going to fill it with a color, and it'll be on top of my image instead of a part of the actual original image. So I have my new layer. I'm going up to edit on the top bar. It's right next to file, and I'm going to go all the way down to fill. I'm going to click on that. And now I get a fill box that pops up with a contents bar at the very top. I'm going to select this menu by just clicking on it right here. You can click on this little arrow, or you can click on the word that says color, or maybe you have the option and it says foreground or background color by default. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to go to color, and I'm going to pick any color from my menu. I'm going to pick a yellow color just because it's a lightning bolt. I'm going to say okay. We want the blending mode to be normal. We want the opacity to be 100%. All right, and click OK. And now you've made a new layer with a selection using the polygonal lasso tool, and you can fill it with whatever color. To deselect this shape and to move on to doing something else, we're going to hit Control D or Command D if you're using a Mac. And then that deselects whatever selection that we have previously done, and then we can begin making a new selection. So I'm going to keep adding to this selection and to this little canvas area that we're working in. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to create a new layer, just like we've done with this lightning bolt here, or whatever shape you've drawn. We always want to work on a new layer when we've added a new selection. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to draw straight lines again to make a new selection. I'm going to try and fill in this space right here with the lightning bolt. Maybe you don't like what you've done, so we're just going to hit Control D to deselect it and try again. All right, just like we did before, I'm going to select an area, and you can move a selection after you have closed off that selection by just hovering over it. And do you see how I get this white cursor with a little box? This means that I can move this selection anywhere on the page. So again, I'm going to go ahead and make my selection, move it around, maybe just a little bit to line it up. Oops. As you can see, I've clicked off too many times, so that means I deselected it on accident. Draw it again here. All right, I'm going to go to Edit, Fill, just like we did before. I'm on this newest layer, so I'm not changing the lightning bolt that I did before. I'm always working on a new layer. I'm going to go to fill it with another color. Let's fill it this time with a contrasting color to that yellow. Let's do like a really bright blue. I'm going to say OK. And we're going to hit Control D or Command D to deselect it. All right, I'm going to add one more shape selection. And again, I don't want to make any changes to this other shape layer, so I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to go to Edit, Fill. This time we're going to fill with another color. So I'm just going to do this bright purple this time. I'm going to say OK. And Command D or Control D to deselect it. Okay, and that's all we're doing for learning the polygonal lasso tool. As you can see, we've only just made selections with straight lines. It's very geometric, and that's all we need to do this image. So to save it out, we're going to go up here to File. We're going to go to Save As, and we're going to save this to our desktop or anywhere that we can readily access it to turn it in. So I'm going to change the title up here to, let's just name it our last names _ polygonal lasso. And right now the file extension is saved as a Photoshop file, but I'm going to come down here to where it says format, and I'm going to change it to a JPEG. JPEGs are compressed file versions from whatever we've been working with in Photoshop, so it makes it a lot easier to send and to turn in, and it won't be an overly large file. All right, so I'm going to make sure I'm saving it to my desktop, and I'm going to hit save. You'll get a box that asks you to specify some options for your JPEG. Your quality number can be anywhere from about 8 to 12, as long as it's on the high range. If you want, you could go a little bit lower to the medium range, which I believe is, I think, from 5 to a 7. But as long as it is below, I think, 15 megabytes, I think you can send it in Teams. So for this purpose, we're just going to go down to 8 right here on our quality. This is plenty high enough for this image. We're just going to say OK. All right. So we've worked on our polygonal lasso tool. Now I want to move on and work with our standard lasso tool. The image that you're going to use for this exercise is this yellow image with the flowers on it, the purple flowers. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go back to Photoshop. I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to select the lasso tool.jpg from the menu. All right, and while I wait for that to open, I'll give you guys, I'll give you just a minute to make sure that you are saving out your previous files of the polygonal lasso tool and just setting those off to the side and then opening up the lasso tool.jpg. All right, so now we're going to get started with our lasso tool selection, or the standard lasso tool. So this tool, again, in the tool menu is right here, same menu that we went to before. It's always the first lasso tool listed. So we're going to click that from the menu. Another way that you can toggle between all three of these tools is with the key command L on the keyboard. If you click L on the keyboard, it will bring up the lasso tool by default. And I believe that if you continue to click it, it will circle through all three of them. But we're just going to go with this lasso tool right here. And what we're going to do with this image is actually we are going to make selections of these flowers and we are going to copy and paste them so that we have more flowers than when we started. And so with the lasso tool, really, it's a freehand selection tool, just like all of them, but it's really just almost like a drawing tool. We can draw our selection and it just closes off that selection for us. So all you're really doing to start is you're clicking and dragging continuously. We're never letting go of our mouse to just like continue on with the selection. We're never just clicking to start. We're actually clicking and holding the entire time until we're done with the selection. So if I were to, let's say I were just to click and release, it's going to always attempt to make some sort of selection. Even if I didn't finish it off, it's always going to select something no matter where I've ended up. So just like with the polygonal lasso tool, remember when we had to close that selection off by going back to the beginning? This lasso tool is nothing like that. We can just start a selection and it will always attempt to finish it by just making a straight line between where we started and where we ended. So like you can see right here with this flower, for example, I'm going to start circling it and then I'm going to stop right here. I'm not going to close off this selection. See how it goes ahead and it just makes the assumption like, oh, I guess you wanted to close off this selection, and it draws a straight line from one point to the other. That's how the lasso tool works. Essentially, because it is freehand, it's just going to assume that you wanted to close off that selection wherever you ended, and it's going to go ahead and make that line for you. Now, selecting with this tool will never always be exact. This is really comes more in handy when we are wanting to roughly select something and maybe move it around. So an image like this that has a very plain background, it's not really a busy image. This is kind of the perfect image where we would maybe use our lasso tools over our smart selection tools like the quick selection and the magic wand. That's because it's really just going to be really quick, easy work if we're doing some simple selecting tasks in Photoshop. All right, so enough about that. To edit this image and to alter it, I want to just go ahead, select any flower on the artboard by drawing a circle around it with your lasso tool. So I'm going to pick this one off here to the very left side. And now, just like the other types of borders that you see when you select, we're always going to see this marching ants border around the flower. I can click and move it wherever I want on the artboard, but I'm just going to leave it circling this flower right here. And I'm going to hit Control C and then Control V. All right, now as you can see, what has changed in our layer palette on the right-hand side, it's made my selection a new layer on its own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this layer. I'm going to double click on the word layer 1, and I'm going to rename it flower 1. And so right now it doesn't look like anything's happened because it pasted that flower selection in the same exact spot where I copied it from. So to move this flower around, I'm going to go up to my move tool. It's the very first tool in Photoshop, or you can click V on the keyboard and it's a black arrow for you. And I'm going to click on where this flower was, and I'm going to move it around on my screen. So as you can see, I can move it right over here, and the background doesn't quite match what I need it to match on this side of the screen, but we're going to fix that. So how we fix that? Well, first of all, our goal with Photoshop is to always do something that is photorealistic, that is seamless and blends in like we have talked about before. So what I'm going to do is let's just go ahead and change this shape just a little bit so that it doesn't look like I literally just copied the same flower and pasted it somewhere else. How I'm going to do that is I'm going to hit Control T on the keyboard or transform, and I'm going to rotate this just a little bit so that I've got it a little different from this one that I've copied it, but the shadow isn't going to be in a weird spot that looks unrealistic. All right, so now that I have this moved, the next step is I'm going to erase some of these harsh edges so that it blends in with the background. To do that, you can go to your eraser tool in Photoshop, or you can click E on your keyboard. And I want to make sure that this is a very soft erasing edge. It doesn't look harsh like the way it is here. So to make sure that I'm doing that, I'm going to go to my eraser brush settings at the very top of Photoshop. I'm going to click on the 150 circular brush that I have right here. You might have a different number or brush setting based on whatever you've done last. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to make sure I have a decent size brush. Anywhere from 150s to 200 is plenty big. And I'm going to make sure my hardness slider is all the way at 0. You could also just come right into this window. Say I had it on 39%. I could also just come in here and type the number 0 and hit enter, and all of my settings have been saved. If I want to make the brush any bigger while I am working here, maybe this brush size isn't exactly the size I want, I could easily increase this brush size by clicking the brackets next to the letter P on my keyboard. All right, so I'm just going and taking my eraser tool, and I am erasing around this flower so that I can get rid of some of the harsh edges. And just keep erasing until you get it to where you think it blends in just the right amount to where it's not something you really notice. It's looks like it's always been there. All right, in a way. And what I'm going to do for this image is I'm actually going to do this a few more times. So what I want you guys all to do, I want you guys to have 5 new flower layers in this image. So continue selecting with the lasso tool, keep clicking and circling your flowers, and you're going to copy those selections. Make sure you're always on your background layer when you're going to copy these selections. If I were to be on the flower 1 layer and I just wanted to select and click to copy, it's going to give me this notification that it could not complete the copy command because that selected area is empty. And that is because we are making a selection on a layer that has no image except for the small little flower down here in the corner. So unless I'm selecting this flower, we have nothing to select on this layer. So always make sure you're on your background layer. You're going to use your lasso tool to draw a circle around any other flower. We're going to hit Control C and Control V, and that pastes your new flower on another layer. Just like we did before, we're going to rename it Flower 2. And we're going to select our Move tool to move the flower on the artboard. Now, again, I've got this flower pasted exactly where I copied it from. So we're going to move it to where we want it over here. I'm actually going to move this flower all the way over to the right side. And I'm going to hit Control T on the keyboard to rotate it and change it around a little bit. I don't want to go too crazy because I don't want it to look like it's out of place. I want it to blend in perfectly. So I think this orientation matches with some of our other flowers on here. I'm just going to double click to place that down. And again, I'm going to go to get my eraser tool or click E on the keyboard. And I'm going to erase these harsh edges to make it all blend in together. And if at some point you're lost, just go ahead and raise your hand and I'll walk around to help you. And this is past me talking to future you, but yeah, just go ahead, raise your hand. I'm going to walk around and help you if you're lost. But you guys continue to copy and paste these flowers until you have 5 new flower layers right here. So I'm going to keep pasting these, and if you need any help, raise your hand and I will come around to help you. Another thing to keep in mind is when you're selecting, make sure you're drawing a big enough circle around your flower so that you're grabbing not only just the background, but you're also grabbing all of the shadow that is attached to that flower. That way we're not cutting it off at a weird spot to where it looks unnatural. So like what I'm doing right here, I'm drawing a circle big enough around the flower that also includes the shadow right here. So that way my job to make this blend in is not going to be that hard. I just have to softly erase the edges, and that is all I have to do. So I'm going to copy my last flower here. I'm going to drag it off to the side. Let's make this fit in about right here. I'm going to maybe rotate this just about like that. I'm going to grab my eraser. I'm going to erase these edges. All right, and I'm going to make sure that it says flower 6 on the layer. And there you go. All right, so now I have all of my new flowers selected. So if you were to go to the history palette, which is this 3 dots with the turning arrow right here, if you click on it, you can see all of these changes we made. So if you ever messed up or feel like you need to go back some, you can always click along this list and see all of the selections you made, all of the progress you've made, all up until the very end. So what I'm going to do now is, now that I have everything exactly where I want it, I've got all my new flower layers made, got them all labeled 1 through 5. For me, I added an extra one, so now I have a flower 6. You're going to go ahead and we're going to select all of these layers by either you can click and drag, I believe, to select them, or you can click your first layer, hold down Shift on the keyboard, and go all the way down the menu to your last layer or your background layer, and it should highlight all of these layers in a light gray. In case anybody missed it, we're going to go to our background layer. We're going to click, or you could go to your top layer and click here, whichever one you want to click on. Just it has to be either the first one or the last one. We're going to click on it. We're going to hold down Shift. We're going to go all the way to either the first or last, whichever way we're starting. And we're going to hold Shift and click on all the layers, just Shift and clicking. And you'll see that it highlights all of them. Now, we're going to right click on our layers, or we can go up here to this little line menu up here and click on that as well. And we're going to go all the way down to merge layers at the very bottom. Once I have that selected, I'm going to go and click merge layers, and now it's all one image. So I'm going to go back again just to show you all. Click on background, and you're going to hold down Shift. You're going to go to your very top layer, whichever order you have them in, to have them all selected in a light gray. We're going to right click, and we're going to go to the option at the bottom that says merge layers. All right, now that I have all my layers merged, I'm going to go up to the image menu up here. Should say image, and you'll get this long list of choices that starts with mode, adjustments, all of that stuff. So once I have this new background layer selected, I'm going to go to image, adjustments, and I'm going to go to hue saturation. Now you could have also pulled up this menu by holding down Control and the letter U on your keyboard, but I also want you guys to know where you need to find these. If you ever, maybe you just forgotten the key command, if you go up to here to image, adjustments, hue saturation, and it should pull up the hue saturation color menu. Now, I'm going to shift the hue slider at the very top. And as you can see, as I change this, my colors will change. So I'm going to change this to where my colors have shifted. Let's just shift them to like a very slight, more peachy pink and this like bright fuchsia color. Or if you wanted, you can just pick any sort of color combo from your menu. I also really like the purple and the blue. All right, let's go ahead You can make yours whatever new color combination you want. Remember, we started with this yellow background with the purple flowers. So as long as we end up with something a little different, I'm going to go with this bright pink and the dark blue color shift. I'm just going to say okay. And now you can see we've ended up with an image that's pretty different from where we started. We have a lot more flowers and it's a completely different color palette. And that's all we're doing to this image with the lasso tool. We've copied and pasted multiple layers with the lasso tool, selecting our flowers, and we've added a fun color change. All right, just like I did before with our polygonal lasso tool picture, I'm going to go ahead and go up to File, Save. We're going to save this as a 8 or 12 numbered quality JPEG, as long as it's in the high range. We want to make sure that we're always saving high quality images. We're going to say okay. All right, and that should have saved wherever you last put your file. Now we're going to move on to our very last tutorial or walkthrough for our image. And this one is going to use both of the images that were for the magnetic lasso tool. So again, I'm going to go to File and Open. I'm going to open Magnetic Lasso Tool 1 and 2. All right, and I'm going to give you guys just a minute to save out your lasso tool JPEGs before we get started using the magnetic lasso tool. All right, and now you should have open the image that is magnetic lasso tool 1, or it has just this simple flower on this background, and then there should be another rose bush image as your second magnetic lasso tool image. All right, so to get started with the magnetic lasso tool, there's something that you guys should know, and if you don't remember it from our notes that we just did, the magnetic lasso tool will start selecting a scene based on the edges that it detects and where you are hovering your mouse or your lasso cursor. So the reason why I've chosen this image is because this is one of the, it's a simple high contrast image that is going to be perfect for selecting with the magnetic lasso tool. The edges of the subject of this image are clearly defined, so we can use the magnetic lasso tool easy to select this from its background. And so we always want to be using high contrast images when we use our lasso tools, but especially for this magnetic lasso tool. So just like we've done with all of our other images, we're going to click and hover over that lasso tool menu to pull up all of our options. We're going to select the magnetic lasso tool from that menu. And just like we did with the polygonal lasso tool, we're going to click anywhere to get started. For me, I'm going to zoom in. So feel free to zoom in to this flower image. You can zoom in by clicking Control plus on your keyboard. Or if you need to zoom out, you can click Control minus. All right, so I'm going to hit Control plus, and like our polygonal lasso tool, like I said, you can click anywhere to get started, but we want to click along one of the edges of this flower. So I'm going to click on the outer edge right here between this petal and this petal over here. And so you'll notice that once I start moving my cursor along the edge of the flower, it starts automatically detecting the edge and depositing little anchor points along the petal to begin my selection. And so the thing with the magnetic lasso tool is we can't just start moving all around the screen because it's trying to select based on where our mouse is going. So if I go all over the screen like this with my mouse and I'm not slow and steady, it's just going to start dropping points wherever because it wants to try and detect that edge and it wants to try and land a point where you need it to go. So it's really important that we are following the edge of whatever we're selecting, that it's a high contrast image, and that we are just clicking to get started anywhere along the edge of the subject. We're not clicking, unless we're selecting, the middle of this right here. We can do that by clicking and dragging around the middle. But really what we want to do, and where this tool works the absolute best, is when we are selecting around the edges of an object. So I'm going to click to get started, and very slowly I'm going to inch along the outer edge of my flower for this magnetic lasso tool to get started depositing points. And I don't need to click unless I'm making maybe a really tight turn on an object and I want to make sure that my lasso tool stays put. So I'm going to maybe drop a point right here on the edge of my petal, just so that when I pick up again and I start moving slowly, it doesn't go anywhere. It just stays right along the edge of this flower. But really, you're just moving really slowly across the petal edge. You're not like making any harsh movements. We don't even have to click. We just have to drag our cursor along the edge, and it's going to follow this shape. Maybe put a point down if you think it's necessary, but just move really slowly. And if you need to get used to using this tool, go ahead and try and start making selections, moving really slowly. If you have to start again, just close off the shape, hit Command D or Control D on PC, and just try start making your shape again. But we're just moving super slowly, as you can see here on my screen. And we're just going to keep drawing, move as slow as possible to select our flower. If we do any sudden movements, it will try and select something maybe that we didn't intend. So just take your time, be patient, and you're going to keep selecting this outer edge. And why it does take some time, it won't be as bad as, see, and I just accidentally moved my mouse. So I need to close off the selection. And one way that you can actually fix this, say we're okay with maybe this part of the petal being taken off, but we need to get rid of this right here. We can go to our other selection tools and just make sure that we are taking away from the selection to clean it up. So now I have all of this selected, but I've missed just this little part of the petal, but that's okay. I can always go back in with my magnetic lasso tool, and I can hold down Shift, and we can add back to that selection. When you hit Shift, you get a plus sign that appears and adds to your shape for you. All right, and so I'll give you guys a minute to keep working and selecting your flower. And what you're going to do, like we've done with our other selections, you're going to keep working around the perimeter of the shape. So that way, or of the flower. And so when you get to the end of your tracing, you're going to get that little circle next to your magnetic lasso icon. And that means you're closing off your selection. So you're going to want to go ahead and click to finish off the selection, and you should see this marching ants border, meaning that you've successfully closed off your selection and you are ready to edit it or copy it in some way. So keep working, making your selections. If I need to pause this video, I will, and I will go over it as best I can. But you're just going to keep working around your flower to finish making your selection. All right, once you have it closed off, we're going to go ahead and we're actually going to copy this flower by hitting Control C. And then we're going to paste it on this new magnetic lasso tool JPEG image by hitting Control V. By default, it should paste the flower pretty much right in the square center of our image, which is actually fine. It actually works out for us. Already, this flower looks like it blends in pretty well with the scene that we have going on here, but it still is sticking out just a little bit because it is a little bit of a brighter pink than some of these other flowers. And the lighting isn't quite matching up with what we have going on here. So there's going to be a few ways where we're going to edit this flower layer right here on this new magnetic lasso tool image. So I'm always going to make sure that I'm clicking on this new flower layer. I don't want to edit this background picture at all. I'm just going to edit our pasted selection. So, or it should be by default, it should say layer 1. We can go ahead and rename that actually for it to just say flower, or we'll just have it say new flower. All right, and so like I did before with our lasso tool where we changed the color of this flower image, I'm going to change some of the hue and saturation of our flower, our newest one that we've added, because right now what I'm noticing is some of the yellows in here are just a little bit bright for what the color palette of this image back here is. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure my new flower layer is selected. I'm going to go up here to image, adjustments, and then I'm going to go to hue and saturation. All right, so what I can tell from this background image is that some of it's a little desaturated. So maybe let's bring down our saturation just a touch so that we can match it up as best we can to all the other flowers. And already that's actually doing a great job of matching this pink color to this pink going on over here and what we can see up here. The next thing I want to do is maybe we're going to shift this hue slider to the right or left just a little bit to see what it does to the pink color that we have. Let's see if maybe we can match it up any better than what we already have. And what I'm noticing is that, honestly, this doesn't need to be changed very much. It's just little shifts here and there to make it match up and blend in. So I'm going to go ahead and let's just leave that the way it is. I think that looks great. Maybe a little bit more desaturated. So I'm going all the way down to -40 for my saturation value. So if you wanted to just click into your saturation value, you could just hit -40. And one slider that I haven't really played with or shown you guys is the lightness slider. All this really does is it makes the image brighter or darker. But by itself, this slider doesn't really need to be touched very much. Honestly, it's really can edit an image to where it fades it out too much and maybe it would make it stick out. So unless that's the effect you're going for, you won't really need to touch the slider too much. So I've changed my saturation. Let's go back to negative. We'll just leave it on -35. That seems about right. Or maybe let's go all the way back up to -30. I'm trying to match this pink as much as I can with some of the other pinks, but there's a lot of variety in this image. So I think right here is going to be good. And I'm going to say, okay. All right, so now already that does so much to make this flower blend in with its background just a little more, but there's a couple more color and lighting corrections that we're going to do. So the next correction that I want to do is I'm going to actually hit Control M on the keyboard, and that's going to bring up something called curves. You could also go to the curves palette by going back up to image, going back to adjustment and picking curves right here. It's the third option down when we go to this adjustments menu. And so this is a slider I think we may have used before in this class, but this will alter the highlights, midtones, and shadows of an image based on where you're dragging on these points right here along this line. And so something I'm noticing about this image is that there's a little bit of a, not a strong highlight color really going on. So I'm going to make this kind of look a little more moody, and I'm going to bring down the brightness of it just a touch. And I'm going to play with some of the shadows and shading on it just to get it to match up as best I can. And you can always see where you started and where you're ending up by toggling the on-off preview right here at on the right-hand side of this curves window. So as you can see, I'm making very, very minute color changes, but it all in the end pays off to when it looks like an actual image the way that it was intended to look. But you know that you've actually edited it, and it's just your little secret that you have. All right, so I'm going to toggle again, see where we started, see where we're ending up. To me, that looks pretty good. Not making big changes. We're just making little changes here and there to make this blend in. Another thing that you might want to consider doing is I'm going to actually hit Control T and I'm going to rotate this flower to see if rotating it will actually give it any more sort of life and character to how this image is. And I actually think the lighting on this flower blends in pretty well. You might want to try zooming out every now and then to make sure that it blends in the way you would like. And to me, that looks pretty good. I think I want to go ahead and just add a drop shadow as well, something very slight, because a lot of this background image obviously has very dark shadows, again, very moody. And so I'm going to try and match that as much as possible. So I have my new flower, and I made sure I had my new flower selected. I went down to effects right here on my layer palette. I'm going to go all the way down to drop shadow. And I'm going to play around with my shadow settings. So right now I have it set to this very warm brown color, but I want to actually go ahead and make this a pretty dark, almost a black color for the shadow, only because a lot of the shadows in this image are very dark. I'm going to bump up the opacity to 86%, or you could even go higher. And then I'm going to drag this size bar right here. And I'm actually going to make this the full 250 pixels that I can have it. That's because I want this to be a very dominant shadow. I want it to blend in down here. And you can actually change what's called the spread of the shadow, but sometimes when you do that, you can go a little overboard. So try not to go too much on the spread slider. We want it to look as natural as possible. And another thing I'm going to notice is where are the shadows being cast on this image? So far, I can see that there's some sort of light source coming from the center top of this image, and it's casting a shadow directly down. So I want to try and match that as much as possible. So I'm going to change the angle on my shadow to be directly down. And then so when I move my shadow slider and the distance on that shadow, it's going to make it end up in the right exact spot that I want it. It's going to look as realistic as possible. And I believe that looks a lot better than no shadow, because that looks more true to the image that we were working with. I'm going to say okay. And there you go. That is all we are doing to this image to learn the magnetic lasso tool. So as you remember, we selected this flower out from its original background. We copied and pasted it onto this bush. And then we changed the saturation just a little bit. And we also changed some of the lighting to make it blend in. And so now when we zoom out and we look at the whole image, this flower looks pretty much like it was always there. The only thing I would think that maybe stands out is just this muted yellow color right here. But as far as selecting it and getting it into the image and blending it in, I think we did a pretty good job. All right, and as before, I'm just going to hit File, Save As, or Save. And we are going to save this JPEG as our last name, underscore magnetic lasso tool. We're going to make sure that we are saving this as a JPEG. Save it to your desktop or wherever you can easily access it to turn it in. I'm going to leave the quality number at an 8 like I have for the other ones. I'm going to say okay. And there you have all 3 of your images edited with all 3 of the different lasso tools. Just a quick review, the polygonal lasso tool will select things with straight edges. It's really helpful if we're creating geometric shapes. Maybe we have to select a box or something that has a lot of straight edges. We would use the polygonal lasso tool to make that selection. Even if I wanted to select this entire canvas, I could use the polygonal lasso tool because it works with straight edges. Next, the lasso tool that we use in this image, we used it to just simply draw circles around our flowers and select them from the background and move them elsewhere on the artboard. This image had 5 to 6 new flowers. We merged this whole image and learned how to merge our layers and change the color, hue, and saturation. And then finally, again, like I said, with the magnetic lasso tool, we use the magnetic lasso tools to select this flower out. The magnetic lasso tool works best with high contrast, really simple images, just like how the lasso tool works best with simple images. Really, it's meant for single object selections. And then we copied and pasted it onto this new flower bush. And so we made it look as if it was originally a part of this bush all along. All right, so we're going to all make sure that we've saved our images somewhere where it has our last name and it has underscore whatever tool we used. And then we are going to turn them into teams. So I'm going to let everybody do that. Let's make sure we save all of our images, and we're going to upload them to our newest assignment in Teams so that we can turn them in for a grade. All right, guys. If you need any help, I'll be circling around the room. And again, just raise your hand if you have any questions or need any help turning anything in.